Hi, and welcome to another edition of Office Hours, where I'm going to answer your questions about the college application process. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of application season, and so there are lots and lots of questions that I'm seeing about SAT scores, about admissions essays, about um, extracurriculars and activity lists, and all the sort of nuts and bolts that go into building an application. Before we get going on today's questions, though, I'm going to say again, as always, I'm answering these questions to the best of my ability based on the information provided to me. So if there's not enough information and I'm going to have to make a lot of assumptions, if I were to really be working with this student, my advice would probably be different because I would have a more complete picture of who they are. But that said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to lump 3 questions together into one because they're all SAT related. SAT scores just came out, and so there are lots of questions about, is this score good enough, should I submit this score, etc. I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of these. Outer Looped writes, should I submit my SAT score? For reference, my highest score so far is a 1420, and I come from a Title I school with an average SAT of around 950. The schools which I'm debating submitting my score to are USC, NYU, and Rice. I'm just going to write some stuff down here. And we're talking about a 1420. I've heard not to submit if you're under the 25th percentile score, which I am for all 3. I was wondering if my school having a low average would make any difference. Just hoping for some insight in general. Okay? Similar. Fluid Wave 4331 writes, 1520 SAT for Yale, restricted early action. Can I superscore a 1520 with 800 on math? For Yale, will this be sufficient or do I need a higher score to reach the median, 1540? And lastly, should I submit my current SAT score? Dangerous Flower 599 writes, I just received my SAT score, 690 in English, 710 in math, total 1400. Is it worth it to send in these scores to UMass Amherst, UW, UMichigan, GU, Northeastern, Villanova, UVM, and Dartmouth as a Hispanic female, daughter of an immigrant and first-gen student? Okay, so I'm gonna switch us over here to this sort of view, and we're gonna write out some stuff. I've already got some notes here. We've got USC, NYU, and Rice, and this is a 1420 from a T1 school, average of 950. Okay. The other student was a 1520 for Yale, and Yale's median is a 1540. And then our last student was a 1400. It was 690 English, 710 math for a 1400 total. Now, I will say for the 2 Title I kids, this last one over here on the right, all we know is it's a female Hispanic first generation student. We don't know what their major is. I'm assuming, UW is slightly more tech oriented, but the other schools, Villanova, Dartmouth, Northeastern, GU, UMich is good at a lot of stuff. UMass Amherst is good at a lot of things. It's a big research university. So we don't know what major either. A 710 in math might give me a little bit of concern for like an engineering major or a CS major or a math major, physics major, things like that. Not that it's a bad score by any means, but when we're talking about schools like Dartmouth, Northeastern, UMich, UW, and places like that, we want that math score to be as high as possible because those schools tend to have a really spiky math score. But in general, and same with the other student, the 1420 coming from a Title I, we don't know their major. They're just concerned because they feel like this score is below the 25th percentile, right? So before we get into a lot of this data, I did want to sort of come over here and show you some information about SAT scores. I see this question all the time. And so we just need to be aware that when we're talking about like a 1400, that's putting you in the 97th percentile of test takers in the nation for math. Okay, or for the SAT, excuse me. A 1400 puts you in the 97th percentile, meaning you're in the top 3% of all test takers in the nation. That's pretty darn good, right? And if you're getting a 1300, you're still in the top 10% of all test takers in the nation. So if you're anywhere between 1350 and 1600, you're in pretty limited company as far as test takers nationally. All right. So that's number one to keep in mind. Number two to keep in mind that this website, everything from here on is going to look at things by percentile, not by score. Okay. So if we're looking at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, obviously their median is at the 99th percentile. However, what that means is that 50% of the students are above the median, 50% of the students are below the median. That's what the median is. It's the exact center data point. So if you are below 1500, if you're somewhere between 14 and 1500, you're still able to get in, right? You're just not at the highest possible statistical chance of getting in based on your SAT score alone. Now, for this student over here from the Title I school with this 1420, their larger context, maybe I shouldn't have drawn a circle, their larger context of their school being sort of a 950 average is going to do a lot to help them, right? Yale specifically has gone back to requiring the SAT this year, and their argument was that they had a lot of minority students who had scores that, you know, kids online would call bad, right? We're talking like 1250s, and that score would have been enough to get the student in. They had all the other things. They had the extracurriculars, they had the leadership, they had the sort of personal qualities, they had the grades and the rigor, they had all the stuff. And if they had just submitted that SAT score, Yale says they would have admitted these students. But being test optional, these people did not submit their score because they felt like it was far below the middle 50%. And so they weren't willing to submit that. And it cost them admission to Yale. That was a poor decision that they made because they were looking at this number in a vacuum and saying, well, you know, go away. You know, Yale is taking median 99th percentile, median 1500. So 1250 is not going to cut it, 1300 is not going to cut it. And that's just not true. That's just not true. You shouldn't be looking at the score, and this goes for all three students who asked this question. You shouldn't be looking at the score and comparing your score to the middle 50% at the university. I mean, you can, and I can see why people logically do that. But what you really should be doing is looking at your application, looking at your school, looking at your score, and then saying, does this number make my application stronger? Or does it make my application weaker? And that question has nothing to do with any other applicant, any university numbers, anything like that, right? It has to do with you. And so, especially for this 1420, where the average is 950, I would say that number makes your application stronger. You know, you're getting good grades. Obviously, you have a pretty high GPA, but even other students with pretty high GPAs aren't scoring in the top 3% of applicants in the nation. They just aren't. So coming out of that school with a 1420, that's going to bring attention to your application because it's higher than normal for your school. And it validates your GPA for a college. They're going to look at your GPA and they're going to say, oh, great, really high, fantastic. But then they're going to look at your school's history overall and they're going to say, oh, but that high GPA doesn't really translate to success at our school. And then they'll see that 1420 and they'll say, oh, but they got a really high SAT score, so maybe they can be successful at our school. GPA says you'll work hard, you'll be consistent, you'll do the homework, you'll study for tests. SAT score shows that you have the aptitude and ability to be successful. And so those two things will combine to make a pretty compelling case for your admission. If you take that out just because you feel like it's not above the middle 50, they lose that perspective on your application and on your studies. They lose that validation of your grades from your high school. So I would argue that you should totally be submitting this. Same with this other person over here, this 1520 from Yale, 1540 median score. 1540 is the median. And not only is it the median, you're above the 99th percentile. You're in the 0.1 or you're in the 0.9% of test takers in the nation. A 1520 is a fantastic score, and you should be sending that to every single school you apply to, regardless of what their median is, right? Nationally, that score is really, really strong. And I would, my personal clients would be told to submit that to every single school they apply to, regardless of your major, regardless of anything, really. That's a score we're submitting. You shouldn't be that concerned about 20 points. The other reality is your score comes in a range. Okay, you get an actual score, but then if you look at the score report, there should be a colored bar on a line graph, and that shows your predicted range. So if you took the test, once a day for 5 days straight and did no prep in between, your score might fluctuate 20 points plus or minus along the number line. And so if you take it one day and you get a 1540, another day you get a 1520, another day you get a 1510, another day you get a 1530, that represents zero statistical change in your ability. So a 1540 is well within your statistical ability. So I wouldn't, you're thinking too hard. You're thinking too hard about it. Okay. And I'm tempted to say the same thing about this last student with this 690, 710 math, 1400. Again, I know I started off by saying, like, are you an engineering major? Are you a CS major? Are you a physics major, math major, etc.? And so while it's true, as a first generation Hispanic student, I would probably still submit this score because, again, a 1400 puts you in the 97th percentile nationally. And if I scroll down here, you'll see Vassar, Tulane, and UMich are taking a median 98th percentile. That means 50% of them, of admitted students, have a score below the 98th percentile. So they're in that 1400 range, right? UT Austin, Santa Clara University are taking like 95th percentile, which is around a 1350, right? So it's still pretty high. And if we come down here, we can kind of see, here's a bunch of schools that are in that 99th percentile median, which again means that 50% of students are below the median, right? If we come down here to 97th percentile, median score, right? Then we're still looking at Colgate, we're looking at Georgia Tech. The Hispanic student was a female, so we can talk about Scripps as well. We've got Chapel Hill, McAllister, UCLA, and of course the UCs are test blind now. This chart was made, I think, in 2020. We drop down to the 96th percentile, and we're still looking at Maryland College Park. We're looking at Trinity in Texas. We're looking at Lehigh. We're looking at Oberlin, right? And so even right below your median percentile score, these are still fantastic universities, right? Here we've got more UCs, we've got Austin, we've got School of Mines if you're looking for a more hands-on education, Santa Clara University, Binghamton, Minnesota, right? These are all still fantastic schools. And so, your score is high enough to land you in this 97th percentile area where you're the middle, you're the median score. 50% of kids would still have a score higher than you, but 50% would have a score lower than yours. If you drop down a percentage point, now you're above the median, and you're still looking at some fantastic universities, right? And so even up here, in the 98th percentile, 99th percentile, there's not a huge difference. The score might look like a big difference. 1420 versus 1520 might look like a huge difference. But we're talking about being in the top 1% versus being in the top 3%. You're still scoring fantastically high relative to everyone in the country. You're still in that sort of elite top test score getters, top test takers. Okay, so when I keep seeing these questions about, what should I do about these scores, 1400, 1520, 1420, your score is higher than you think it is, relatively speaking. You might live in a bubble academically where there are other test takers who get higher scores than you. And of course, that doesn't necessarily apply to this person who gave us that statistical data about their high school. But for the other two, you might live in a academic bubble where scores are inflated. And if kids aren't bragging about their score, it's because they didn't score in the 1500s. So there are probably plenty of kids who aren't bragging about their score. You just don't notice because they don't brag. And so you are in fine company if you score in the 1400s or above. Fine company. It's a fantastic score. Okay, and I wouldn't hesitate about submitting it because these are all the schools that you're looking at who are happy to take students anywhere near your score. And we could keep going further and further down the line and find more and more schools. But students need to panic a little less about their SAT score because the difference between a 1500 and a 1400 is not as big as it seems. And it's definitely not as big as the difference between a 1300 and a 1200, right? There's a 10% jump from a 12 to a 1300. But once you're at like 1380, you are in the top 5% of test takers in the nation. And those are the kinds of scores that we should be submitting just about everywhere we apply because it's not about the school's scores, it's about whether this makes you a stronger applicant or not. All right, that's those three. This student, Spider Hummus, writes, is there an alternative to USC for entering the entertainment industry? The goal is to work in the entertainment industry in LA. I want to do a career path like start in the mailroom, become an assistant, get into development or management, become a producer, and then some kind of executive. It's a pretty well defined career path. You don't need to go to college to start in the mailroom, though, I don't believe. However, I plan on going to community college the first 2 years at Santa Monica, then hopefully transfer to USC for business ideally or communications/public relations if not business. In case I'm rejected or can't afford USC, it's the most expensive college in the US, so there's a good chance of that. I need an alternative, but I'm struggling to find it, and therefore choosing the correct program at SMC, Santa Monica. UCLA seems like the only alternative option, but they don't have any business undergrad or any entertainment industry related majors that are TAP. I think that's transfer. Communication, PR, and film are all non transfer admissible, so acceptance is greater than 20% and TAPS is greater than 80%. And besides UCLA, I don't even know what other school to consider for a relevant degree with internship and networking opportunities. Any advice on picking an entertainment industry related program at a community college so I can later transfer to USC, but also have an alternative in case of rejection? Or any other advice to ensure the above career path? So, of course, USC has a fantastic business program. If you wanted to go to USC's business school, or obviously UCLA also has a fantastic business program. They all or not business, sorry, they have a fantastic like film program. You would have to do like economics or communications or something at UCLA for your undergrad. They don't have a business undergrad. However, there are plenty of other universities that you are completely overlooking that have connections to the entertainment industry in the Los Angeles area. I do recommend staying in the Los Angeles area just because you're going to have those connections and you're going to have those internship opportunities at the schools in the region. But Chapman University has one of the best film programs in the nation. And within their film school, within Dodge College of Film, they have a entertainment industry business major. And so you would be doing business courses, but specifically geared towards the entertainment industry. They also have a business school on campus, and it's a fine business program. It's a really, really good one. Lots of hands on opportunities, and one of the cool things there is anything that you develop or design while you're a business student there, even if you're using school resources, you retain the rights to that product or that idea so that you can create that business. The college is not going to demand any share of the product or profits just because you use their facilities and their tools to design something. So they have a really great business program. They have a really great film business specific major within their film school. That said, their film school has an average admit rate of 8% for production and editing and that sort of stuff. So it's a really competitive program to get into. But that's definitely one that wasn't mentioned. Another great school to look at is Occidental. They have a great film program. They don't have a business major, but they do have communications, they do have economics, and a lot of their economics majors at Occidental. I was just talking to a rep from Oxy last week. A lot of their econ majors go on to get MBAs, or they go on to work in business in the executive level, in companies across the US and the world. So I would look at Occidental because they have a strong film program and they're in the LA area. I would look at Chapman because they're the same. University of Redlands is another private school with a decent admit rate that you might consider. They're a little bit more, you know, east of LA. They're a little far afield. The town of Redlands is on the very, very eastern edge of civilization down there in SoCal. You're talking about being out more towards Bear Valley, but they have a really good business program. They have connections to the film industry, and they did just buy a film school that's in Burbank, California, that they are going to merge with and create a film program for the University of Redlands. And I know that you don't want to do film production, but with the film school coming online at Redlands, there's probably going to be more opportunities to do film related business, um, get film related business experiences through the university over at Redlands. So that's another one that I would look at. In general, I would also just look at any of the other liberal arts colleges that are in the Southern California area, the north of San Diego. You could look at Loyola Marymount. That's another great private school that's got a good film program. You can look at some of the CSUs that are down there. I know CSU LA has a good film school. Northridge has a good film school, but you would want to look into their business and communications majors and see what those are like. If your goal is to transfer and if affordability is a question, the CSUs are definitely schools to look at. But um, I think you would be interested in, I think Oxy, Chapman, and Redlands might offer you some interesting opportunities that are worth exploring that did not make your list. Granted, your list is two schools. So that's what I would say about that. But definitely, if I were working with this student, we would have a longer conversation about different opportunities at different schools. But that's just me riffing off the top of my head about film in Southern California or in the entertainment industry. Last question I'm going to tackle is a quick one. When should you make a common application account? Pretty Elk 2659 writes, when should you make a common app account? Is junior year a good time to make it? No. No. Junior year is not a good time to make a common app account. Don't do it. Don't. Uh, First of all, you're a junior. Focus on your APs, focus on your SAT, ACT, focus on your extracurriculars and having experiences that are going to make you a more interesting applicant. There's no benefit to making a common application account anytime before August of your senior year, right before school starts, right? There's no benefit, none at all. For more practical purposes, if you create a common application account now, in August, they are going to reset the accounts. Every year, I have my own fake Common App account that I use to look at the applications and help students navigate the app and all that sort of stuff. And every year, I get an email from college or from the Common App saying, "Hey, we're migrating the accounts over. We're resetting the system. When you want to migrate your account, go sign in and do this, this, this." every year they have to update applications, they have to update essay prompts, they have to update the system in general to reset things for the next year. And so if you make your account now, you're going to be looking at information that's a year too soon, and then come July or August, it's all going to get reset, and you're going to have to just re-sign. It's not a huge deal. Like you re-sign in, and usually your schools are saved, but I think you have the option to say don't save my schools and delete those. But it's going to get reset. So why would you create the account now? Like, you don't need to. You don't need to. By all means, if you want to, go ahead. But do you need to? When should you? You should do it in August before school starts. That's when you should do it. You don't need to do it before that. But is there any harm in doing so? Not really. Not really. And so that's where I'm going to sort of leave us off for today. A lot of talk about SAT scores and that sort of stuff. And then, conversations about film industry specifically, which, every year I work with at least a couple of film students. And so I'm always happy to talk about film. And then it was kind of an interesting question about trying to get a jump on the application process junior year and starting early, which I do not recommend. You've got other things that you should be prioritizing and concerning yourself with instead of worrying about when to create your common application account. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks again for watching. And if you have any questions that you want to ask me, you can email me at collegequestions@dawesacademics.com. You can reach out in the comment section below, or you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook or YouTube. Thanks so much for watching. So, if that video helped you, then please help me by liking, sharing, and subscribing, or following, on whatever social media platform you prefer. Doing so really helps allow me to do what I like to do, which is help students and families manage the college application process. And if you're looking for more targeted support yourself, there's a link in the description that'll allow you to book a consultation with me, and we'll see how I can help. It's free. Anyway, thanks again for watching.